Birds 365. We're lucky enough to have our bud Les Bowen get up early and shoot the breeze with some football talk here on Birds 365. Les, you are officially not on anybody's payroll these days. We still appreciate you, and that's why we have you on, because we know you know what you're talking about. But are you following it with the same fervor? Are you like, is the phone been attached to your hand to stay on top of things for either websites and or Twitter for these 2 days, almost 48 hours of Eagles transactions?
Yes and no, Jody. I'm following it very, very closely, but I'm not calling agents and begging for information. And frankly, I don't miss that a whole lot.
Yeah. Drew's going to contact, Shepty first, so it's always disappointing. But with the
my Drew story, right? About Drew, I texted Drew one time asking for something, and he texted back, off the record, no comment.
That's great.
Yeah. Making the sausage. Yeah. It's all agents, people. It's all agents. But Les, I think we're all surprised that the Eagles were able to get James Bradberry back, because James had been pretty honest all season and, certainly sounded like he was going to go for the biggest deal and didn't. Said he left money on the table, and I believe him from that perspective, coming off the year he had, even at his age. But I think it was interesting the way he framed it from the perspective of, being comfortable here. And Jody mentioned the coaches, and hey, his coaches are gone.
John, I was quoting. That wasn't me. That was him saying, I like the coaches. And I had the same reaction you did. The coaches that are still here, I guess.
Jonathan Gannon, and even more so the guy he worked with on a daily basis, Denard Wilson, is now in Baltimore. What do you make of the Bradberry deal and him coming back?
Well, I'm glad he said those things, and I'm glad he's back. But what I see is a deal that isn't really. I think I read somewhere that he's now the 17th cornerback by average per year. The big deal wasn't out there. We all thought it would be. I don't know quite what to make of that. He's a guy who has this year, which he was all pro, isn't the only year he's ever played. He's been real good in some situations, and he hasn't been that great in other situations. And maybe he's kind of scheme dependent a little bit. You mentioned the coach is changing, but the scheme isn't going to change too much. Yeah. And, I don't know. I think they got him at a reasonable price, and that makes sense, that if he's going to sign for a deal that's not at the top of the market, then it makes sense that he's back here, especially with all this Slay stuff going on. That kind of came out of nowhere last week. I do think Slay will end up playing here one way or another, more likely than not. But, it adds once this Slay uncertainty came into play, it certainly added some urgency to maybe doing something with Bradberry, I think.
All right, then let me play urgency against urgency. The Bradberry re-signing, what effect does it have on the urgency to get CJGJ done and a contract for him to stay here in Philadelphia? Does it add to it, take away from it? How does one, in your eyes, affect the other?
It gives me a little hope in that Gardner Johnson also hasn't signed anywhere. We don't know. There was at least one top of the market safety who did sign, the guy from Cincinnati.
Jesse Bates. Yeah.
So the market is set. If Gardner Johnson has an offer like that, you would think he would take it. And we haven't heard anything yet. So, it gives me some hope there, I guess. I'm not sure. It is important that they get him back. I don't know if it's like, oh my God, the season's going to be horrible if they don't get him back, but it would be very, very good to get that piece back as well. That would be a huge step for the Eagles, I think.
Yeah, I think at this stage, Les, it's only positive. I mean, is there any other angle you could see other than CJ hasn't gotten the offer that he was expecting?
I doubt that he's like on vacation in the Himalayas or anything. I mean,
No, he's on
this
Twitter,
is,
so I can
yeah,
confirm that.
you get the deal and you sign it,
Yeah.
and that's the only interpretation I can put on this.
Yeah. Oh, but people brought up, and I brought up, I don't want to throw it, he's got a big personality, man. CJ is and Marcus Hayes, your old colleague, had a column about Denard Wilson and how things went awry with Denard in the Eagles. And he mentioned, Denard was one of the ones tasked with sort of keeping CJ on task.
Yeah.
That could scare some other organizations away, that type of personality. Do you think in a weird way that helps the Eagles? And if they want him back, by the way, the assumption is they want him back.
I think
they right with that assumption.
I mean, I think they do. During the time he was out last season, it was pretty clear to me that they missed him and that they knew they missed him, and they certainly don't have you've already lost Marcus Epps, so you're bringing Reed Blankenship is going to replace one of these guys, but he can't replace both of them. It's like yesterday people were talking about Nakobe Dean after the second linebacker left, and my joke was, how many positions is he going to play? I just think it is important to them. I think they do like him. I hadn't thought too much about the personality aspect. I think that is tricky a little bit. But I also think this is a guy that, he had all those interceptions early. Then he got hurt. And maybe, maybe it's hard to evaluate exactly where he is as a player. The interceptions made it look like he was, a superstar. Interceptions kind of come and go to me. Most guys don't have a ton of them year after year after year after year. There's an element of luck involved, things like that. But I thought he played very, very well. Again, scheme, I don't know. I don't know what teams are looking at, really. I don't know how many teams are going to go big at safety, for money at safety. Corner is the more, high-profile position still in the NFL. I don't know what to make of it. I haven't seen him really linked with anybody that makes a lot of sense.
No, there haven't been many rumors about him other than here in Philadelphia. All right. The biggest addition/re-addition, certainly I say for the Eagles, was James Bradberry. Probably the second biggest move that they made was the adding of a new running back, and that would be Rashad Penny from the Seattle Seahawks. Kind of one of those good news, bad news things. Good news is when this guy plays, he puts up numbers. He's got game-breaking capabilities. Good news is they got him for under $2 million per. He's got incentives. It could take it just above $2 million, but it maxes out at $2.1 million. Bad news is he doesn't always play, as in has missed half of his games in his history in the National Football League. Does the good news outweigh the bad news, or does the bad news outweigh the good news less?
Yeah, I don't know, but I don't think he's going to be the lead back. I think that'll be Kenny Gainwell. I think he'll have a role, and if he's reasonably healthy, he'll be effective in that role. But he's never had, something like 120 carries. So is like a career high.
He's never on the field.
He's going to be an accent piece. He's not going to be the key to the offense or anything like that, even if he's healthy. I saw him be very effective against the Eagles a couple of years ago. So,
I remember that run.
Yeah.
That was a hell of a run.
So, I'm glad to see it, but I think it'll be mostly Gainwell. And let's not forget Boston Scott, who's back yet again on his, I believe, unofficially 22nd consecutive one-year contract. I predict there'll be a headline in the year 2041. Boston Scott becomes the Eagles' all-time leading rusher.
Yeah, I'm surprised the Eagles gave Boston $2 million less. I'm surprised the Giants didn't give him 2.5 just to get them out of their hair.
Yes, that would be worth that to the Giants, you would think.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it? But I'm always glad to see Boston because you never, Boston's. He'll do his job, and
I think Boston's a great backup, good kick returner, kind of solved their kick return issues. I have no problem with that. From the running back position, Les, I think the lead back is working out for the draft in April. I think they're going to still draft somebody in the middle rounds. It's a very deep running back draft, supposedly.
Yeah,
try to replicate.
See if that person really becomes the lead back as a rookie. But yeah, that's quite possible. And they've still got Trey Sermon hanging around too.
Trey Sermon's in the mix as well. But I want to talk to you less about valuation because this organization, and they're generally very good at it. And people make a big deal. What a bargain! And by the way, Rashad Penny. It's a tremendous bargain. They can cut him. If it doesn't work, it can cut him. You lose $600,000. It is a very low risk, high reward type situation. Right. So I have no problem with them rolling the dice. But they lost 2 linebackers, another position they don't value. Good players, not great players. And I think people get caught up in this valuation. And because I had a number of fans say, oh, look what the Cowboys spend on running backs, which is true. I don't think it's smart, but they've had good running backs at the back end. Look what the Bears spent on offside. They spent $92 million on offside linebackers. Now, I think that's crazy. But at the end of the day, they got good players. Yeah. They got Tremaine Edmonds and TJ Edwards. And all of a sudden, they got good players. Did they overpay? Sure. All right. At what point, I think there's this polarization. You have to be, you can't pay for this. You can't pay for that. Well, you got to pay for good players, right?
You do. They know what they need for their systems to work, I think, mostly. But I see the point you're making, and I would make it in a slightly different way. Jody mentioned Marcus Hayes, my friend and former colleague, and he had a column yesterday about, just trust Howie. Howie's the best GM in the league. Everything will be fine. Well, I mean, we all have longer memories than just this past season.
Yeah.
The thing that, as a fan, would frustrate me a little bit is, so Howie built the Super Bowl team in 2017, and he did a wonderful job. And then he built the team that got there this past year, and he did a wonderful job. In between, there was a coach firing and some really frustrating years. And I see a lot of talk right now about the 2024 draft and the dozen or more picks the Eagles are going to have. And it almost seems like, this organization's focus is always on maintaining and building and, down the road a lot. And that's great, but you almost get the idea that they're not really expecting to get back to the Super Bowl this year. They won't ever say that, but if I were a fan, I would be a little chuffed at that. Jalen Hurts is going to be 25 years old. You don't waste years of Jalen Hurts. All these other guys, Dallas Goedert, A.J. Brown, they're not getting any younger either. You're looking at a last go-round, almost certainly this time, for Jason Kelsey and Brandon Graham. I would like to see a little more urgency about this season than I think we're seeing. I think Howie acknowledged when he spoke a few weeks ago that they kind of put themselves in a tough position when they didn't re-sign anybody during the season. They decided to do that because everything was going so great, and they didn't want to build up jealousies in the locker room. You gave this guy a deal, I didn't get a deal, which you could certainly see now with the way the Slay thing is going. If they'd given Bradberry this deal in November, I wonder what Slay's
I always say,
ideas would have
Les,
been.
I always say, though, that was part of it. Howie was telling part of the truth, not wanting to upset the apple cart. But the other part was they had no leverage. Everybody
Right.
was having career years. They like to get things done early at a team-friendly price. He had no leverage with these guys.
Right. But see, that always that boggles my mind, John, because if you're negotiating with guys who aren't playing at a top level, well, then why are you looking to re-sign them? If they're not
because
having
you're evaluating
or
that they're going to
above-career
get better.
type years, don't you want to sign the guys who are playing really well? Even though it's going to cost you a little bit more, but they're your best players.
Like you're projecting Jordan Mailata. And he turned into Jordan Mailata. And you got now Jordan Mailata is a bargain. They got in ground floor with Josh Sweat. All of a sudden, he's a double-digit sack guy. Look what that goes for in the NFL. They got in ground floor because they evaluated correctly. Avonte Maddox as a slot corner. They evaluate.
Yeah, you want to do these deals before these guys become Pro Bowl and all pro players. At that point, like John says, you don't have a lot of leverage. But to me, it's you just wonder what the commitment is to 2023, and if they really believe that this is going to be as good a team as last year's team. And that was one of the things we talked about all through the Super Bowl run was you might not have as much talent, in this season. And it's certainly right now that seems to be the case. As get back to John's point, they're happy to just sort of right now have a bare cupboard at some positions, and that can change a lot. There'll be the draft. There'll be guys cut after the draft. There'll be, last year we spent all spring talking about who was going to play corner opposite Slay and who was going to play that other safety spot. And
if I had another Kerry Vincent, Mac McCain we love these guys, Les. We love them. We love them. Yeah.
But the thing for me about Howie Roseman is people feel the need. And this is Philadelphia in general, Philadelphia sports. And it's almost the entire country in general, past even the world of sports, the need to get to the diametrically opposite ends. Either Howie Roseman is the greatest general manager in the history of the National Football League, or Howie Roseman is a bum who needs to be fired. And people get to those ends. And of course, the answer is somewhere in the middle. Last year, when Howie Roseman was the executive of the year in the National Football League, runaway winner, at least in my mind, I didn't see the actual voting cast, he re-signed Derek Barnett. What a stupid move that was. I'm sorry. It was stupid before they brought him back, and it still looks stupid with a year on the books. In the middle of having the best year an NFL executive has had in my last 5-10 years, he doesn't bat 1,000. Nobody bats 1,000. But when guys like Marcus Hayes make the statement, just trust everything how he does. No, we're allowed to point out the ones that he misses, as long as we're giving him credit for the ones he gets right. And he got a hell of a lot right last year. Why do people feel the need to either defend a guy on every move he makes or just look past the ones that he gets wrong because you don't like the guy? And his name's Howie. That's not a general manager's name. Why is that the case in our society today, Les?
Well, I think you just defined talk radio for us, Jody.
Yeah.
That's
talk radio, Twitter. It's not just at one point it was only talk radio. Now there's a whole bunch of venues and outlets where this comes into play, Les.
Yeah, that's very true. And that was kind of what I was trying to say is that in some of these years, and I've said this before on your show, some years those moves aren't there. Some years James Bradberry doesn't drop in your lap right as training camps opened, or the Saints aren't trying to trade C.J. Gardner-Johnson at the very moment that you need a safety. A few years ago, the Eagles went into a season with no linebackers worthy of anything more than practice squad, and they looked like it on the field.
Eric Wilson, baby, linebacker one. Eric Wilson.
These guys have to be available. Somebody has to want to trade you A.J. Brown on draft day. It isn't just Howie's waving his magic wand over the league. And there are years when it doesn't happen, and it doesn't make him stupid in those years, I don't think. But there's what you can do some years, there's what's available some years, and we'll see how this all plays out. They will come up with solutions in the long run, but we don't know that those solutions will get them anywhere near where they were last season.
Yeah. To Jody's point, yeah, everything is so polarized, and it doesn't matter in sports. We're having fun. It matters more in the real world. But, everybody wants a definitive yes or no, black or white, this or that. Everything is, I got questions today. Happy new league year, by the way, gentlemen. And are we going to get information on Slay? And I was like, maybe. Lane Johnson, are they going to restructure? Maybe. Everybody wants a yes or no. It's not a yes or no. If they need money, they'll restructure Lane's contract. They'll give him they'll turn his salary into a signing bonus, and they'll do it that way. If Slay and Drew Rosenhaus are at loggerheads, you might see something today. You might not. I mean, that's the real world, but everybody wants the definitive.
Right.
Yes,
exactly.
No.
But I will say one thing for Drew, since I was kind of making fun of him earlier. Drew is a realist as an agent. And what they did when they said, hey, feel free to go out there and find a team that wants to pay you what you think you're going to get. They did that knowing, I think, that there's very little chance of anybody being willing to pay Slay at 32.
Oh, of course.
What Slay thinks. And Drew will figure that out. Drew's not going to go down with the ship, One of the problems you have is like Lamar Jackson right now in Baltimore doesn't have an agent. He's his own agent. And that's a scary thing in the NFL because agents, they have a bunch of clients. They've done a bunch of contracts over the years. They have concrete ideas of what something is worth, and it's grounded in, comparables. A guy that's his own agent thinks he's the best player in the world. And it's, I've seen what Lamar Jackson has allegedly turned down. And if I were the Ravens, I'd be pretty concerned.
Yeah.
But, I do think with Slay, I think, Drew Rosenhaus will either find that deal somewhere, which is possible. I don't think it's probable. But he'll either find that deal or he'll come back to the Eagles and say, okay, X, and they'll get something done.
All right, let me give you another one, as John just described it, an all or nothing situation, because I get the feeling that the Eagles fans are feeling this way these days. The contract extension for Jalen Hurts.
Mm-hmm.
I'll take a stand right now. It will not get done till one of these three other quarterbacks sets the table, sets the bar, sets the market. Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert. Everyone wants to. Howie wants to go first. Howie wants to get well, as one of the two you just correctly stated. Would you Les? Takes two to tango. Howie can want to do whatever he wants to do, but somebody's got to be at the other end of a negotiation going, all right, good, I'm in too. I don't think Jalen Hurts' representation will allow him to sign a contract and be first. That they're going to want to wait for either Burrow or Herbert or Lamar Jackson to go get that deal and then have that as ammunition to negotiate your deal. If I'm right about this, how long are we going to have to wait for a Jalen contract extension?
Well, that's a good question. And you raise a really good point. I think that's quite possible that they're waiting. The vibe I get is that the Eagles are willing to.
Was Les freezing up on us?
Les froze up on us. We'll see if we can get him back to
we got to find out where Les lives. I think he's got
Haddon Township. Les lives in Haddon Township.
They got all that money in Haddon Township, and his thing's freezing up. Yeah. All right, we got him.
By the way, Les, we're talking about Les. I shouldn't say. I don't know if Les lives close to me in South Jersey. Nick Sirianni, Les. I don't know if he's frozen. He seems frozen. Is he frozen for you?
Got a good smile though.
Yeah, Nick was at a bar right near Les's house. Les, I was just saying, Nick Sirianni there was a little viral video of him taking shots at a bar very close to you.
It is.
I was wondering if you ever walked down there and had a couple beers with the head coach of the Eagles.
I have not. I was going to text him and say, hey, next time you're going there, let me know. That place is maybe a mile from my house. It's not the closest to my house. But, yeah, I knew exactly where he was with that. He lives in Haddonfield. I'm in Haddonfield.
Lives in Haddonfield, yeah.
I'm a few blocks off of Haddonfield. In fact, I figured out Nick's house is on one of my running routes. I didn't even realize that.
I know where Nick's house is because my parents used to live in Haddonfield, but
okay.
Yeah, I don't like to let people know, but
no,
but yeah,
you don't want people camping out in his yard or anything.
No, exactly. But anyway, yeah, that was an interesting sidebar. I wondered if Les Bowen was one of those having a shot with Nick Sirianni.
Unfortunately, I was not. I would have liked to have been. He didn't invite.
Also, Jason Kelsey had a shot with Howie Roseman in Indianapolis. That was awkward, by the way, if you saw that video, Les. To me, Jason Kelsey can do what he wants. He can say, yeah, I'm coming back. But there is some, repercussions to it in the fact that another player who I thought would be gone by now is not, and Isaac Seumalo. We all assume Cam Jurgens is going to move to right guard now as what are we at? The fifth heir apparent to Jason Kelsey.
Yeah.
Moving positions now. Do you like the Eagles' thought process there of potentially moving Cam?
Yeah, I do. I know last year I talked to some people about what Jurgens could do. If he didn't start at center as a rookie, could they play him at guard? Some people felt he's so light that with him and Lane on the right side, you have a very light right side. Lane is a tall, athletic guy, not a beefy mauler kind of guy. I don't know that that's a huge concern. I think he'll be pretty good there. And I think you want to play him, frankly, because he's a second-round pick, in his second season. I don't know what to make of Isaac's situation. I think he probably can get a pretty good job somewhere. He certainly played very, very well. He does have some injuries in his background.
Yeah, maybe it's the foot. You never know with these health things, because that was a very serious injury, the Lisfranc injury. So,
and maybe I think sometimes fans don't quite understand, if a guy plays and is healthy, they're like, okay, all that stuff's out the window. Well, it really isn't. When you're looking to sign a guy and give him money over multiple years and make an investment in him, your doctors really scrutinize that. And they say this will hold up for X number of years or, one really good example was Jay Ajayi in the draft. He went way past where he should have gone to the Dolphins because he had a knee and team doctors flat out told their teams 3-4 years. Yeah, that's going to be about it,
Yeah.
And that's the way they look at it. It's very cold-blooded and cut and dried. And we don't know what Isaac's situation is. Maybe he can play.
Yeah. And that brings us all the way back to Rashad Penny. There's a reason the Eagles got Rashad Penny for $1.6 million. I mean, the guy's been a train wreck from an injury standpoint, unfortunately, for his career. There's a reason a talented player is only getting that much money.
Yeah, teams really hate to pay for guys that aren't playing, and that's when you get into all the, pressure to play injured and all that stuff, it's one of the things that they really try to avoid if they can.
All right, Les, need your take at the linebacker position. John and I were talking about it before you came aboard. Getting a lot of feedback that TJ Edwards and Kaiser White are just average linebackers. Losing them is not that big a deal because they're average players. We've also seen below average players attempt to play linebacker for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yes.
So it's easier said than done even if which I think both were above average this year. But if I consent to the fact that they were just average players, how do we know the Eagles are going to get average players, not better than average players, just average players to replace the guys that they've lost at linebacker.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was talking about Howie and his magic wand. It's got to be there, and they've got to find it. And T.J. Edwards was a great story. They got him as an undrafted rookie, and they developed him, but he wasn't that good as a rookie. He was a special teams guy as a rookie. It took years for him to become. I think he's an above-average player.
Yes.
I think he has limitations. I don't think he's a sideline to sideline, all pro kind of linebacker, but he became a good linebacker, but it took years. It really took years and good coaching and him being really committed to it. And, it is hard to find those guys. And Kazir White was a 1-year rental. He came in, started out great, and I thought he really lost steam second half of the season. It would have been great. He was kind of a local guy. He wanted to stay here, I think, but the money just they weren't going to spend for that. Are they going to find guys that good going forward? That's a real good question. That has not been their best position in terms of evaluations.
It's a long list.
To spend draft capital there, and we'll just have to see. We'll have to see. I wonder, I don't know Sean Desai at all, the new defensive coordinator. You would think he would have some say in this, what he values, going forward. If he really puts a higher premium on good linebacking, then maybe they'll do something. There's still a lot that can happen. Last year at this time in free agency, as I kind of said, we were pulling our hair out over they didn't get a wide receiver. The wide receivers all went. They either re-signed with their current teams or they were traded and the Eagles weren't involved, or they signed somewhere and the Eagles didn't get them. And, and then draft night, A.J. Brown, so we don't know what the situation is going to be at linebacker, but it is very possible, Jody, to get back to your question, that they don't have a good solution in here.
Yeah. At Les Bowen, we kept you long. I apologize for that, but I'll leave you. Follow Les on Twitter. I want to talk about that coaching staff. I'll leave it there. I mean, one of the best things about the 2022 Eagles was the continuity on the coaching staff. I think that really helped them. Now, all of a sudden, Nick Sirianni, and you've been around last, you saw, nobody had a better staff than Andy's first staff. But as the years went on, became more difficult to replace these guys. We saw it with Doug Peterson. Now we're seeing it with Nick Sirianni, losing both coordinators. I think the assumption is the offense is fine, but I thought Shane Steichen was a pretty good play caller. And the Denard Wilson sort of machinations, that could have rubbed some people the wrong way. How concerned are you that these coaching changes could have an impact on the Eagles?
We'll just have to see, John. I understand all that, and I think there's valid concerns, but that's what happens when you win. And, I think part of Doug Peterson's downfall was that stuff like that happened and they didn't really adjust well. That some of the people that Doug was very big on continuity, but you can't always just promote from within. Sometimes the guy you have waiting isn't really as good as the guy that left, and you kind of have to recognize that when it's true. I think that's one thing that happened with Andy. Eventually they were promoting guys who had been very low level assistants into jobs. And also with Andy, another thing that happened was when Andy came to the Eagles, I think he had been an assistant for a while in the NFL, and he really knew all the other good position coaches and assistants around the league. But as he went into his second decade as a head coach, I think he had totally lost those connections. And I think, it got really hard for him to find people, which is how he ended up with Juan Castillo as his defensive coordinator.
Yeah.
And with Nick, he's still pretty fresh. I mean, he's still a pretty young guy who spent, pretty recent seasons as an assistant. I think he still knows people. And I think Howie has gotten really good at, looking at people around the league and finding, good replacements for people. But yeah, the Denard Wilson thing, real quickly, is a concern because the D-backs swore by that guy. They loved him.
They did.
And I was a little surprised that they didn't want to work something out with him, to stay on after he was over. After they didn't promote him to D coordinator, they could have at least thrown him some kind of a bone, given him an expanded title or something as the D-backs coach, and papered that over for a year or so anyway. They chose not to do that, and it will be interesting to see the repercussions. It will be interesting to see who they get to replace him. They haven't done that yet.
Yeah.
All right, a couple things before we let you go, Les. When you said D-backs, you said D-backs right there. For some reason, my mind went to, what does an Arizona baseball team have to do with the Philadelphia Eagles? I get what you meant. And the Andy Reid coaching thing, I'll never forget the interview Glenn McNamara I got to do with Jeff Lurie after the Eagles hired Andy Reid. We asked him, this guy was only not even a coordinator. What did he say to you in the interview that made you think that this guy's? And he told the story of Andy coming in with the binders on 20 specific guys that he would hire for his staff if they gave him the job. And they thought that was just off the charts, above preparation, uber impressive from Andy Reid. So he did live up to that reputation. Last thing, and I'm going to let you be Howie Roseman, Les Bowen. The Philadelphia Eagles backup quarterback in 2023 will be who, and how much is that guy going to get paid?
Well, right now, I would say Jacoby Brissett. And what does he make now? I don't have any idea.
I think more important is, what are other backup quarterbacks getting paid in free agency this year? And the number is like in the $8 million per range.
Yeah.
So Jarrett Stidham got $10 million yesterday. Jarrett Stidham got $10 million to be a backup quarterback. Jacoby Brissett's better than that. So are they going to pay $10 or $11 or $12 million for their backup QB?
I think there's a good chance that they are. I don't think they have a lot of alternatives. They don't want to spend a high draft pick on a quarterback. They don't want to try to do what Howie did in 2020, to replace, to give a cheap backup to Carson Wentz. They have too many other needs to go do something like that. So if they draft a quarterback, it'll be very late in the draft, or, undrafted free agent, that type of thing. And you can't depend on that for a backup. You need somebody. And Jalen Hurts, for all that rhetoric about how he knows how to avoid the big hits and so forth, we saw him get hurt, and they need somebody that can win games if he's not able to play. You hope it won't be more than 1 or 2 games, but they need that guy, and I think they will find somebody out there, and they'll pay for it.
Les, a pleasure. If we could, we'd pay you, but they just barely pay us, so
that's okay.
I'll
get you a shot at that bar, Les.
Indeed, yes.
Yeah, I can see you two guys hanging out with Nick there. Just don't go near the tennis court, because that's when he gets his dander up. And
I don't want to mess with that guy.
Don't want to mess.
Intense.
Les, always a pleasure, bud. Appreciate you jumping in with us today. We'll get you back up in a couple of weeks.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you,
Bowen, longtime Eagle beat reporter, sharing his opinions and insights. That's what we're all about here on Birds 365. Is opinions and insights. We'll get those of Johnny Clark in less than 20 minutes from now. Come back. I want to get John. He's kind of already tipped his hand as to who he thinks should be the Eagle backup quarterback. It's not going to come as cheaply as one thinks. That's a position that's doing okay.
They value that position, though.
They
like
do,
linebacker or running back.
And the league does, because a couple of guys got some pretty damn impressive deals, at least for my money, so far here in this offseason of free agency. McDonald and McMullen coming back right here on Birds 3.